Okay, welcome everybody. Thanks for coming. We're going to have a brief welcome from our language access as well with some instructions. So Roy, if you want to start it off.
Okay, Rosie, I'll start. We invite everyone. Welcome to today's meeting. My name is Roy. I'm a Tagalog interpreter together with Sitari and Rocio for the other languages, Khmer and Spanish. We invite everyone to select their language of choice and be part of this multilingual space. Please select English if you have limited Spanish proficiency. This way, you will be able to hear the interpreters from Spanish to English. For those of you who will be speaking in English, please remember to speak slower than the normal because we do use 30% more words in Spanish to say the same thing in English. Bilingual presenters, please be sure to be in the channel that corresponds to the language you are speaking. If you're on the computer at the bottom, you will see a globe that says interpretation. Put a check mark on English if you need to hear the Spanish to English. If your cell phone or tablet locate 3 dots, put a check mark on English and hit done. This last step is very important to activate and begin the interpretation. I'll be speaking the instructions now in Tagalog. Inaanyayahan namin kayo na piliin ang lengguwahe o wika na inyong pinili para sa isang espasyong mayroong maraming wika. Piliin ang Tagalog o Filipino kung kayo ay may limitadong kakayahan sa Ingles, Espanyol at Kamay. Sa ganitong paraan, maririnig nyo ang mga interpreter sa iba't ibang wika sa Tagalog. Kung kayo ay nasa computer, sa ibaba makikita nyo ang isang globe na nagsasabing interpretation. Lagyan ng check ang Tagalog nang maaaring marinig ang buong presentasyon sa Tagalog. Kung kayo ay nasa cellphone or tablet, hanapin ang tatlong tuldok, lagyan ng check ang Tagalog at pindutin ng done. Siguraduhin i-click ang done dahil ito ang magpapaandar at magsisimula ng interpretasyon. Sa kasawiang palat, ang interpretasyon ay hindi gagana sa Chromebook o kung kayo ay dadial sa meeting. Siguraduhin ang inyong Zoom app ay bago. At kung mayroong mga tanong sa interpretasyon, ilagay ito sa chat. Okay, I pass it on to Rocio. Thank you.
Thank you, Roy. I will be reading in Spanish now. Hola y bienvenidos a todos a la reunión. Mi nombre es Rocío y estoy aquí con mis compañeros de interpretación en los otros idiomas, Roy y Sitari, para apoyar con el acceso a idiomas. Anunciaré este mensaje también se anunciará en otros idiomas. Les invitamos a todos a seleccionar su idioma de preferencia para poder formar parte de este espacio multilingüe. Seleccione el español si está limitado en su dominio del inglés. De esta manera puede escuchar a las intérpretes del inglés al español. Si está en su computadora, hay un globo en la parte inferior de su pantalla que dice Interpretación, donde podrá seleccionar el español. Ponga una palomita en el español para poder escuchar de inglés al español. Si está usando su celular o tableta, ubique los 3 puntitos y ponga una palomita en español y seleccione Done, o a veces en español dice Listo, para poder finalizar. Este último paso es muy importante para activar la interpretación. Lamentablemente, la interpretación no funciona con Chromebooks y si llamó para ingresar a la reunión de Zoom, asegure de actualizar su aplicación y cualquier pregunta sobre la interpretación, indíquela por favor por medio del chat. All right, I'll pass it on to Sitari now.
Thank you, Rocio. ជំរាបសួរបងប្អូនទាំងអស់គ្នាយើងខ្ញុំសូមអញ្ជើញអ្នកទាំងអស់គ្នាជ្រើសរើសភាសាដែលអ្នកចង់ស្ដាប់នេះគឺជាផ្នែកមួយនៃពហុភាសាសូមជ្រើសរើសភាសាខ្មែរប្រសិនបើអ្នកមានកម្រិតភាសាអង់គ្លេសអេស្ប៉ាញនិងភាសាកាតាឡុកវិធីនេះអ្នកនឹងអាចស្ដាប់អ្នកបកប្រែភាសានិងភាសាផ្សេងៗតាមភាសាខ្មែរបានប្រសិនបើអ្នកប្រើកុំព្យូទ័ររបស់អ្នកសូមមើលនៅខាងក្រោមអ្នកនឹងឃើញផែនដីដែលនិយាយការបកប្រែភាសាសូម check នៅលើភាសាខ្មែរដើម្បីស្ដាប់ការប្រជុំជាភាសាខ្មែរប្រសិនបើអ្នកប្រើទូរស័ព្ទដៃឬ tablet របស់អ្នកសូមមើលនៅលើទីតាំងចំណុច3ហើយចុចនៅលើភាសាខ្មែររួចហើយអាចចាប់ផ្ដើមស្ដាប់ការបកប្រែភាសាគួរឲ្យសោកស្ដាយការបកប្រែភាសានេះមិនដំណើរការលើ Chromebook ឬទូរស័ព្ទទៅស្ដាប់ការប្រជុំនេះបានទេសូមប្រាកដថាកម្មវិធី Zoom របស់អ្នកត្រូវតម្លើងឲ្យទាន់សម័យប្រសិនបើអ្នកមានសំណួរអ្វីអំពីការបកប្រែភាសាសូមមើលសរសេរនៅក្នុង chat Now I'm passing on to the host to start this meeting. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I've just activated the interpreters, so we can begin the presentation now. 1 second. All right, Hi, everybody. Welcome. My name is Lisa DeSmit. I'm Director of Programs with the Arts Council for Long Beach. And today I'm going to be presenting information, technical assistance on the Community Project Grant and the Creative Economy Grant that's part of the Community Project Grant process. So this is new. There's going to be a lot of information. This video will be up on our YouTube channel. I do ask that everybody please mute themselves during the presentation, and we will be taking questions at the end. So you can unmute yourself at the end or type questions in the chat and we'll be able to take questions at the end. So this is for the Community Projects Grant Technical Assistance. We'll be going through a lot of information. This video will be up. We were recording and it will be up on YouTube on our channel afterwards. So if you want to just listen now and be able to rewatch it later, it will be available on our YouTube channel. And I will begin with the presentation. Thanks everybody for coming. Welcome. I'm excited to see you all. One second, sorry, my presentation is not moving forward. Give me 1 second. Okay. I also want to begin with a land acknowledgement. We recognize that we live and work on the traditional and sacred lands of the Tongva, Kitch, Aksharan, and Chumash, and the many other indigenous groups who call these grounds home. We honor and extend our gratitude to all of the original people still living in this region. So today I want to go over mainly the Community Project Grant, but I do want to talk about the Arts Council's other grant opportunities as well. Very briefly mention those just in case there's another grant category that you want to apply for or that may be a better fit. So we have two types of grants. We have our annual grants and we have our micro grants. The annual grants are just one time per year, and those are the Professional Artist Fellowship, Community Project, which is this workshop here. And we have operating grants 1 and 2, and I'll briefly describe each of those. Quarterly, we have micro grants that are available. The next deadline is actually May 15th. So if that's something that you're interested in, please take a look at that grant application as well. So the Community Project Grant is a program that supports exemplary artistic, cultural, and arts educational projects of arts and cultural organizations in Long Beach. Through the Community Project Grant program, the Arts Council for Long Beach partners with arts and cultural organizations. Operating grants provide unrestricted operating support to Long Beach-based arts and cultural organizations whose primary mission is to collect, preserve, present, and/or commission exemplary works of art, mainly visual, theater, dance, music, performance. Works of art must be of regional significance for the benefit of the general public and provide educational opportunities that enable audiences to better understand and appreciate the arts. So with operating, I do get a lot of questions about the difference between operating and community project. And a lot of it has to do with the annual operating budget of the organization. So for the for operating grants, it needs to be a budget of at least $250,000 annually. And the organizations do need to have their own 501c3 nonprofit and be headquartered in Long Beach. If you do have questions after this about operating grants, I'm happy to set up a one-on-one appointment with folks interested in that grant. But the main difference is the annual operating budget and having it the own 501c3 nonprofit. Community project grants can apply with a fiscal sponsor. I'll get more into that during the workshop. And then the last category is the Professional Artist Fellowship. And this is for individual artists who are recognized for their exemplary artistic work and for recent work through the fellowship. And we will be having a workshop for that next Tuesday, the 17th. So if you have questions about the fellowship application, feel free to join that workshop as well. And that is for individual artists, not for organizations. So that's the main difference. And you can only apply to one annual grant category, either the fellowship, community project, or operating. So if you need assistance with understanding which category you need to apply for, I'm happy to help answer those questions and assist with that. I do want to go over what the process is and how funding is determined. So the Arts Council for Long Beach receives the applications. We'll review them for eligibility and completeness, make sure that they meet the requirements. Those applications will be sent to a review panel, and that review panel is independent of the Arts Council. We put out a call every year for panelists, and those panelists are put together and selected. There's one board member and 4 community members on each panel. The panelists will score the applications. They will rank them based on scores and availability of funds and make recommendations for funding. Then those recommendations will go before the Arts Council's allocations committee, and the allocations committee will review those recommendations, ratify them before presenting them before the board of directors. And the board of directors will give final approval on the grants. Applicants are notified once the Arts Council receives our contract with the City of Long Beach, which is generally sometime in November, December, and awards are usually given out sometime around January or February. So let's talk about the eligibility requirements for the community project grant. The grant is for arts, cultural, and historical organizations that are headquartered in the City of Long Beach that either have a 501c3 nonprofit status or who comply with the requirements listed below, or are applying with a fiscal sponsor that is a 501c3 nonprofit that's headquartered in Long Beach and meets the requirements listed below. So need to have a minimum of 2 years of arts and cultural programming in Long Beach, need to use qualified artists or professional arts administrators in programming, planning, and delivery, and needs to have confirmed programming schedule with secured venues. And the programming must take place during October 1st through September 30th. So that's our fiscal year, that's the program year. So October 1st, 2022 through September 30th, 2023. And need to use disciplines that include visual, performing, literary, audio, media, and or other folk and traditional arts. So if your organization is using a fiscal sponsor or fiscal receiver, if you do not have a nonprofit status, but meet all the other eligibility requirements for the community project grant, you can use a fiscal receiver. And both the applicant and fiscal receiver must have similar organization goals and must sign a formal letter of agreement outlining the responsibilities for managing the grant. The fiscal receiver must be headquartered in Long Beach and have demonstrated arts or cultural experience in Long Beach for at least 2 years prior to the time of the application. They must have a 501c3 status through the IRS and provide fiscal and administrative services needed to complete the proposed project. If the grant is awarded, the fiscal receiver becomes the legal contractor with the Arts Council. And I'm happy to answer any specific questions related to that afterwards as well. So what's not funded? What's ineligible? So any non-arts, cultural, or historical organizations, current Arts Council staff, organizations with executive management who currently are Arts Council for Long Beach staff or serve as members of the board of directors or have immediate family members connected to the Arts Council for Long Beach, or its staff or board of directors, grantees that have incomplete contracts funded by the Arts Council in previous years, and any city-owned operated organizations, who receive direct funding from the City of Long Beach through the general fund. And organizations can only apply for one Arts Council annual grant category. So either operating 1, operating 2, community project grant, or professional artist fellowship. In the grant application, we do ask for expenses for the project. And there are certain expenses that are ineligible for Arts Council funding. Those are out-of-town travel expenses or activities, capital expenditures, including permanent equipment, land, buildings, or construction services, funding events, hospitality, food, trusts, or endowments, debt reduction efforts or ongoing deficit operations, programs with religious or sectarian purposes that are part of a religious service, expenses incurred before the start date of the grant period, and programs that aid or service political campaigns or political groups. I'm going to get into the difference between the community project grant and the new city grant that's a part of this. So matching funds are a part of the community project grant, but are not part of the other funds. And I'll get into that in a little bit more detail. But I want to talk a little bit about matching funds as part of the community project grant. So all community project grant recipients must provide a dollar for dollar match for the proposed project during the fiscal year. So the cash match may be from corporate, private contributors, county, state, or federal government grants, or earned income. But it cannot be in-kind contributions. So if some people don't know the difference between cash and in-kind, an in-kind contribution is any non-monetary donation, such as a service or a good. If someone lends their digital marketing skills, for example, to a nonprofit for free, this would be in-kind. So there's no cash exchange. So for the community project grant, there does need to be a dollar match, and eligible matches can be corporate, private, can be individual contributions, any of those. And for the matching funds, you'll be required to list the matching funds at 3 times during the grant process. You will not be required to list matching funds for the Creative Economy Grant if awarded. So when you're filling out your application, there'll be a spot in the budget form where you can list where your fund is coming from in your budget. When you sign the contract, if you're awarded funding, we will ask for the sources of matching funds in the contract. And then when you submit your final report at the end of the year, at the end of the fiscal year on September 30th, we will ask again for the matching funds. We know that budgets can change throughout the year, so the final report will reflect the actual matching fund. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about this new exciting grant opportunity that's the Creative Economy Grants program. And this year, you only need to submit one application, and you're applying for both the Community Projects Grant and the Community Projects portion of the Creative Economy Grants program. So a little bit of a background. The Long Beach Recovery Act, approved by City Council on March 16th, makes it possible for the Creative Economy Grants program, and it's designed to provide direct financial relief to the arts, cultural, and historic community in Long Beach. And this is to recover from the impact of COVID-19 pandemic. And so the city has partnered with the Arts Council to administer this program. The Creative Economy Grants program includes $48,000 in funding allocated to support community projects grants that support innovative, creative, and diverse programming that reflects the rich cultural diversity of the community and which aids in the recovery of the arts and cultural community from the impact of COVID-19 pandemic. So the applications, as I stated before, will be submitted through the community project grant process. And there's an addendum that's on the website that you can check out. I'll go through all that at the end and show you all where all of that information is and how to apply for the grant. So the requirements for the Creative Economy Grant, there's a few additional things in the addendum that are different from our community project grant. So all of the program expenses need to be expended by December 31st, 2023. So everything for that program needs to be expensed by that time. We'll need to keep records of expenditures, and you'll need to track and report key metrics related to the grant. And I'll go into a little bit more detail about that. So all funds, like I said, must be expensed by the end of the year, the calendar year 2023, and must notify the Arts Council in writing no later than October 31st, 2023, if the organization will not be able to expend the funds by that time. Awardees are responsible for documenting eligible expenditures and making sure that they're in compliance with the Long Beach Recovery Act. So keeping receipts, checks, bills, etc. And the required documentation should be retained and available upon request per Treasury guidelines for 5 to 7 years. We will also be asking for this documentation in the final reporting. So that's how the Arts Council will get that information. And then awardees will also be responsible for tracking and reporting to the Arts Council key metrics related to the grant. So if awarded, you will get that information about what those key metrics are. So as I stated earlier, the Creative Economy Grants does not require a dollar-for-dollar match. It's not required by the Long Beach Recovery Act. Although it's not required, it's highly consideration and preference will be given to applicants who can demonstrate outside support for the project, including corporate or private contributions, county, state, or federal government grants, or earned income. Other criteria for the Creative Economy Grants. Preference will be given to organizations that propose programming in communities in Long Beach that have been most impacted by COVID-19. And so I've put a screenshot here in the addendum. It also has a link to this. But if you look at total cases by zip code, and this is of all time, if you can do the 7-day case rate, or you can scroll to all-time case rate. This is of all time. So these are the sort of, if you will, hotspots, the darker the red, or the darker the orange color, the higher case rate in those zip codes. So those are the most impacted communities. So preference will be given to programming in those communities. And also preference will be given to organizations that propose programming that is free and open to the public. And awardees must allow other Long Beach Recovery Act programs to participate in the programming in order to maximize collective impact. So that's the information about the 2 grants. So the one application is going to help you apply to both grants. You'll be submitting it for both. So how is your application going to be evaluated? This is our criteria for evaluation. So there's 30 possible points. The grant panelists are going to score each application based on this criteria. So 10 points for artistic merit, 10 points for organization management, and 10 points for community impact. So for artistic merit, the quality of the programs, qualifications and experience and training. Is it innovative and creative and unique? Organization management, looking at the budget, is it complete? Is everything fully disclosed? Is there an ability to match for the community project grant section? Does it seem like management structure is sound? And then community impact, does this benefit the Long Beach community? Are artistic personnel represented in the diverse composition of the community and the core and target audience? And then this is also where, if we go back to that previous slide, showing the impact areas, is the programming in those impact areas, and is it free and open to the public? So those will be added to that scoring criteria. So what's in the application? What do you need? There's a checklist at the beginning. I'm going to be going over really quickly over the whole application at the end so you can see exactly how to submit it. So there's a checklist at the beginning. We ask for the organization profile, which is questions about the organization, contact information, address, etc. Narrative information about the projects, information about staff and artists, information about the organization board of directors or steering committee members if applying with a fiscal sponsor. There's a section for arts equity and cultural inclusion statement. And then there's a project budget with notes. We also ask for the most recent board of directors approved organizational budget and an IRS tax determination letter. This would be from the nonprofit that's applying or from the fiscal receiver if applying with the fiscal receiver. If the organization is proposing programs that will take place in schools, we do ask for a letter of support from the school principal or from the school itself. And then we ask for artistic documentation and marketing materials. The artistic documentation is going to be submitted as one PDF. If you're providing videos, you will need to hyperlink the videos in the PDF. The panel does not have time to review a 20-minute video, so we ask for 5 minutes. You can indicate where on the video that you want the panel to start and stop viewing, but no more than 5 minutes per artistic sample. Audio, same thing. We would need hyperlinks to the audio sample. That could be SoundCloud or however you have audio samples. And again, up to 5 minutes. And then there'll be a section for you to indicate the order in which the files should be played, title of the track, that type of information. And then explain any special playback instructions in the work sample sheet. So like I said, start at 4 minutes, play for 2 minutes, just so that the panel can maximize their time. Some will review longer material, but most of the panelists don't have more than 5 minutes to review each sample. For visual documentation, you can provide up to 10 images, and we ask for that to be submitted as you can do it as a PowerPoint, and then each image will be a slide, which would include information about each image, and then save the PowerPoint presentation as a PDF. File sizes should be no larger than 300 DPI and 5 megabytes or smaller. And for the marketing materials, this can be publications, newspaper clippings, anything like that. And so that should all be saved within the same PDF. If you're submitting literary samples, you can submit that as a copy of a PDF. But again, the panel won't have time to read a whole novel. So a small sample of literary work is requested. Okay, so how do you apply for the grant? The deadline is Friday, June 10th, and I'm going to just quickly go over, I'm going to do stop share, and I'm going to show you exactly how to get to this application. The link is here on the presentation, but just going to show you all how to get there. So this is the Arts Council website, artslb.org, and you go to resources, you go to programs, and then grants, and then you're going to navigate to the community project grant page. As you scroll down, you'll see the community project grant guidelines, the addendum for the Recovery Act, the Community Recovery Act funding, and then the actual application. Also, I want to point out, if you scroll down further, you'll see our last year's grantees and kind of get a sense of what was funded in the past. A lot of those grantees are here. If you want to raise your hand. And then the application is right here. So you'll click on that. It closes at midnight, 11:59 p.m. on June 10th. So there are some instructions here that will open up if you want to look at those. And then this is where I talked about the checklist. So you'll check off that you have all of these documents. This is where we ask for the IRS tax determination, the applicant name. If you're being funded by another program, just to make sure that you're only applying for one grant. If it's an in-school program, if you click yes, then it'll ask for the letter of support. It's going to ask if you're applying with a fiscal sponsor and what their official name is, tax ID number, and IRS tax determination letter. And then contact information. This is really important to get right because this is how we notify you about the grant and notify you about who's going to be signing the contract, that type of stuff. So make sure this information, especially the email addresses, are correct, because this is where we're going to get that information for notifying folks. The city council districts where programming is taking place and where administrative offices are located. And then who's going to manage the contract, those type of questions. So making sure that that's as accurate as possible. Checking to make sure that you meet all of the requirements. And then here's a question for the recovery grant, just acknowledging that you know that you realize that you're applying for that grant as well and meet those requirements. This is where you'll put in your mission and goals. You'll talk about your community and core audience. And if you remember the scoring sheet, there were scores for organization management, scores for community impact. So this is where you're going to want to highlight those types of things. This is where the panel is going to be looking for that information. The artistic policy and practice for artist payment. And then the project description. So this is where you're going to talk about your proposed project needs to be within the fiscal year. As I said, October 1st, 2022 through September 30th, 2023. And it can be multiple. A lot of folks who are, say, a theater company will put their whole season here as their proposed project. So that's allowable. It can be a season, it can be one event or multiple events that are part of a project. Who is the target and core audience? You're going to describe that. What is the pricing and how are you going to publicize it? Is there a similar project that you've done in the past? And then how are you evaluating the project? Then we ask for the staff and artists, board of directors or steering leadership committee if you're applying with fiscal sponsor. And we ask for the arts equity and cultural inclusion statement. And then we have the budget. So the budget form is right here that you're going to fill out. It says a CSV file. You can save it as a PDF or CSV. And then we have the terms that tell you how to fill out that budget right below. So you can upload it as a CSV file, an Excel file, or PDF. All of those are allowable files. This section is where it seems like people do run into some issues with the application, attaching files. So making sure that it's in one of those file formats. That could be why you're getting an error message on the application. If the file size is too large, you might get an error message. Those are the common errors that we get is with attachments. You can add any additional project budget notes, and then we ask for the organization budget. So that is also either a CSV, Excel, or PDF that you can upload. And then artistic documentation and marketing materials. I went over that. That's again, can be a JPEG, PNG, or PDF. I highly recommend a PDF, especially if you're putting multiple images in. That's usually the best format. And then saving your application. There is a save and continue if you want to save your application. It will ask you for an email address. So when you do save and continue, it doesn't just save everything in the form. It's going to email you everything, and it doesn't save the attachments. So you'll have to redo the attachments. It's just the narrative part. So you can do save and continue later. And then you hit submit. And this is where it's really, really important to check to make sure that the grant application was submitted. We've had problems with this in the past. So I just want to make sure that your application really is actually received. So when you hit submit, you should get a message at the top that says your application was submitted. Sometimes it'll take you up to the top and you'll just see this section right here, and you won't see the errors because you have to scroll down a little bit and you'll see the errors on the application and it's not submitted. So if you do not receive an email confirmation, please, please, please contact us right away to let us know, because we want to make sure that we receive your application. So I'm just going to go back to the presentation. Again, deadline's Friday, June 10th. If anybody needs assistance, they can email us at grants@artslv.org. It's not going to the next slide, but I am open to take questions now at this time. So if folks would like to raise their hand or type questions in the chat. John, I see you have a question. Oh, you're clapping. Don't be shy.
I have a question. How's everybody doing tonight? Probably not the question, but so with the Creative Economy Grant and the project grant, it sounds like if you apply, it's one application. Now, is it two different checks? Is it two different, is there additional money that comes because of the Creative Economy Grant?
So there's no guarantee that each organization is going to get grants from both funding. This is going to be kind of determined by the panel, determined by eligibility. As I stated, you know, preference for the creative economy is given to organizations working in those areas and that offer free programming. So that'll play a factor into it. I do believe that, you know, there'll be an effort for everybody to hopefully get funding from both categories. So it will probably be two separate contracts or one contract with an addendum.
Okay.
I'm not sure how payments will be issued, whether they'll be separate or not. I have been told that the final report will be through the same, so it'll be one final report. We'll just probably have some additional questions or documentation that needs to be added to it.
Thank you.
Hi, Lisa. Thank you so much for this presentation. It was incredible. I just had a quick question. What is the range of the grants? Yeah.
That's a great question. Yeah. Typically, the community project grants have been anywhere from 1,000 to about 5,000 or 6,000. And so I imagine that the creative economy grants, it's a little bit smaller of a budget than what the community project grant budget is. So it may be a little bit less than, say, 5,000, but I think if you're putting in the request or the matching funds for 5,000, that would probably cover it. We haven't typically funded more than that. We do also get funding from Percent for Arts. And so that typically also goes to the community project grantees. So sometime around the summertime when we find out the number from Percent for Arts, organizations that receive funding may, I don't want to say may because it's pretty typical, will get an additional amount of funding. In the past, it's been around $1,000. I don't want to guarantee anything because we never know from year to year how much is going to be in the Percent for Arts budget. But usually there has been an allocation that also goes to community projects. So that's where that 6,000 comes in, 1 to 6,000 for that grant category.
Perfect. Thank you.
Lisa, it's Debbie here. We intend to give a concert in November, and funds don't come in until after that. So would you wait for the concert in 2023?
It would be outside of our fiscal year, so it wouldn't be, so unfortunately, it is kind of that that October 1st through, say, December is a really tough period for grantees. So they kind of have to, it's almost more of like a reimbursement grant, and you don't know if it's actually coming in. So it's a tough time of year to do that programming. And I understand that predicament, and I know that it's difficult, but that is our fiscal year. So you would have to apply for it in this fiscal year.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's helpful.
Yeah.
Hi, Lisa.
Hi.
Hi, this is Julie. I am wondering if, has anyone ever, well, I know that this new grant obviously is new, so you don't have an answer for that, but in general, has anyone ever used one of these grants for a neighborhood or neighborhood organization that has been around for, let's say, 95 years and is interested in having an artist create some type of memorial that would be placed somewhere within the neighborhood?
So if the neighborhood association demonstrates that they've had at least 2 years of arts and cultural programming, and so that would be sort of that alignment of having, being an organization that has that arts and cultural programming. It is a little bit of a gray area because we do ask for that to be the primary mission. So I'm not sure that that's the primary mission of the organization to do arts and cultural programming. So I'd kind of need a little bit more information about the organization to see if it met that requirement of primarily being in, serving the arts and cultural historic.
And what is the definition of cultural?
I can give examples. We don't have a specific, but for example, the Cambodia Town Cultural Festival is one grantee consistently every year, that one project that we funded. So that's, a cultural organization that, that's their primary mission, is to do that festival.
Okay. Do you have another example? So when you say cultural, is it ethnic related, or
in the past, that it can be, not necessarily. I mean, like for example, the LGBTQ Center each year applies for the Q Fest. So, I would consider that under cultural. It also fits under film, so that, not necessarily.
okay, thank you very much.
Yeah. Any other questions? I don't see any more questions, so I'm gonna stop recording.